of loneliness in this country. I wonder how it can, like, if progress is going to happen anyways, how can we use it to help people who are struggling? The internet's a beautiful thing that you have a world beyond the people you grew up next to, because sometimes you don't fit in your small town. So if AI fills that for people, I think that's really cool. How do we train people to work with AI? How do we make sure that people still have these happy, healthy lives? And I think it's really great if people don't need to do minimum wage jobs. Let's help them get more trained and be more fulfilled. I think most of us, not all of us, but I think most of us are extremely blessed. And your entire life will be better if you spend some time every single day thinking about 5 good things that happened to you that day and maybe what you're going to do to have more good things happen to you.
This is the Human Future Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and spirituality with some of the world's brightest minds. Together, we paint a vision of the desirable future and discuss the actionable steps to make that vision a reality. Today's guest is Kendall Hope Tucker, a prominent figure in the tech startup world, with an impressive track record of 2-time founder who has successfully built and sold companies. Kendall brings deep insight on entrepreneurship, product development, and harnessing the power of data. In our conversation, Kendall shares her perspective on what it takes to build products that delight users and go viral. We also discuss the game-changing potential of AI as a tool to supercharge capabilities like pattern recognition, predictive analytics, and beyond. At the same time, she argues that AI alone isn't enough to succeed. You still need to focus on solving real user problems. Kendall's energy and passion for building and growing is contagious. This episode will give you a peek inside the mind of a serial entrepreneur and maybe leave you inspired to dream bigger. Let's dive in. Welcome.
Thank you.
Kendall, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, as I usually tell people, this is an experiment that I am running. This is my first time having my own show. This is episode 17, I believe.
Amazing.
And it's been going amazing. Amazing, and just meeting new amazing people like yourself. Thank you for Gaben for introducing us.
Yeah.
He was a guest on the show a few episodes ago. So I think for the listeners, to give a little background, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself? What's your story?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think for you and listeners, at the end of this episode, I think you should write in and tell Kirill why I was better than Gaben. And that's super important. So I'm Kendall Hope Tucker. I have founded and sold 2 tech companies. My first company was called Knock. We did enterprise sales technology, specifically for in-person sales. That was an amazing journey. It was much of my early 20s. And we were doing in-person technology, so we were killing it. We had 65 employees, had raised a bunch of venture, and then COVID hit. And I still remember where I was when my major VC called me, and he was like, this is going to impact you. And that's a really hard phone call to get. We did still have very valuable technology, but this idea of pivoting to do something else just wasn't the best fit for us. So we ended up selling the company at the end of 2020. Mm-hmm. We sold it to a big marketing conglomerate down in Puerto Rico. So I then moved to Puerto Rico for 2 years, and I loved it. While I was in Puerto Rico, I started my second company. I wanted to do B2C. I know it's harder, but I just want to do something that was so fun and impacted the lives of tens of thousands of people. So we started this company called Squads that became Fan Rewards. And the premise was, how do we reward people for supporting their favorite creators when the creators are quite small? So how do you as an individual join for that journey and get some sort of financial reward for being there when someone isn't yet Charlie D'Amelio or anyone like that? And so I sold that company at the end of last year, a few months ago. And I'm now head of product at a company called Future. And they have a pretty similar rewards platform, but instead of being for creators, it's for people that go green. So if you choose to buy an electric vehicle instead of driving a gas guzzler, or if you choose to take the subway in New York, we'll give you cash rewards for doing that. And I love leading product, and I'm really enjoying working on this new team.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So just to, we'll start kind of talking about the few more general themes of, let's say, entrepreneurship. You being entrepreneur for so many years, why did you originally even go into it? Like, what was motivating you to go on the somewhat of a challenging path? I mean, being an entrepreneur is a challenging path.
Yeah, I actually, the reason I did it was because I wasn't smart enough to know how hard it would be.
Okay. Yeah.
I had graduated college. I was working in a consulting firm. I was there for a few months, and I was like, is this it? Is this what life is? And I worked a lot of hours, but I was so bored. And so in my spare time, I started building a tool. It was actually for politics because I had studied political science at Columbia. And I started selling it to campaigns. And I was so deep in the political world that I knew what campaigns needed. It was pretty easy to sell to my friends' campaigns. And so when I had 7 paying customers, I said to the consulting firm, look, I've built this thing. I think it might go somewhere. They actually were amazing. They let me go part-time. I left the consulting firm after about a year. And then I was off to the races. And that tool transitioned into B2B, which is a much better market than politics. But no one ever told me it was going to be extremely hard and it's going to take over your entire life and you're never going to sleep. So if I were to do it again, I might do it differently. But I just got into politics. I just got into entrepreneurship at the age of 22 and was off from there.
What was some of the challenges that you had to overcome in the earlier journey?
A million challenges. I didn't know how to be an employee. I certainly didn't know how to have employees. So early on, we raised a friends and family round. We got into Techstars. We had about $400,000, which to me felt like infinite money. I was paying myself $36,000, so we had a lot to go to other people. And then there's this question of, you know what you want to build, but how do you get consensus across your team? How do you get the best ideas from across your team? And how do you empower people to feel like they can take something and run with it? And I think I was really bad at that for about 2 years.
Okay.
I had great people surrounding me. I had investors that were supporting me. But looking back, like, I'm not sure that I was doing the vision communication in the way that I think I'm quite good at now.
Okay.
And so I had to learn that like anyone else does. And when people come to me at that age and they say, hey, I want to start a company, I say 100% you should. But if you want to be chief of staff for a really impressive founder for a few years or have some other way to see what that looks like to lead an increasingly large organization, it's a good idea. But if you choose not to do that, then you'll figure it out. And obviously, a lot of our best entrepreneurs did figure it out at very young ages. So
for sure. Yeah. And so now that you know how to do it, what are some best practices would you outline? Like what have you done wrong before? Like what did you not know before that now you do?
Totally. There's so much. So for my second company, I started it with a guy who had led engineering at my first company. He's amazing. And when we decided we wanted to start a company together, we actually sat down and we had 50 questions, like a prenup. And they were questions of, what do we want the company culture to look like? If in the first year you get an offer for $50 million, do you take it? Or do you build this into a mega unicorn? And we just really needed to get aligned on what our goals were and what the company was going to look like. So we did all of that together. Again, he's incredible. I knew he was going to run engineering, and I would be the one fundraising and leading the team. So we did that. We then brought in people we had worked with previously. So we knew these were people that didn't need to be micromanaged, because as a founder, you never have time to manage someone who needs to be told every day what to do. And we gave them very clear roles. So we had this one guy, and we said, hey, like, you're in charge of the back end. We know, like, you can bring in someone to do DevOps, but we know that you're a genius at setting this up in an intelligent way. And so Mike was my co-founder, we would sit down and we would, at a very high level, say, what do we want to build? And ideally, what can we build in a month so that we can run these very fast tests? And he and I actually ran a bunch of tests before we launched our company because it was fun. But we said everything needs to be done in a month. And then we'll present it to the team. We'll be super clear about why we want to run these tests.
Yeah.
But then let the people run with it.
Yeah.
And we had an amazing team, so they were able to execute much faster
For sure.
than if you're constantly telling people with a bullet point list of what they need to do.
Right. It sounds like alignment in the initial phases are super important to
Totally.
Everyone have a very similar vision of where everyone is going, and then also having team members or everyone who is participating have their own agency, and everyone is making their own decision, not waiting on you to.
Yeah.
And what's the underlying like motivation to, like, you were so excited about telling, like, oh, we were running those experiments and things like that. Where is that source of energy, excitement about even the experiments or about doing all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I was really passionate at both companies about what I was building.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'm just a data person. I don't think that you can sit down and say, I don't think you can sketch out a product and say, this is definitely going to go viral and this is exactly what we want to build. I also think it's very hard to put mock-ups in front of someone and say, hey, do you want to buy this? Because human nature is to flatter the people around you. So people will say, yeah, I'll buy that. You need them to part with their money or their time if it's consumer and they're the product. So I believe in running tests. And I think with $500 on Meta for most things, you can set up a site. You can either have a product or you can have something that's essentially a bootstrapped Google Doc. And you say, great, put in your credit card number. And if people part with their money, you know you're onto something really incredible. But you have to be ruthless in killing your own ideas when it's not resonating with people. And I think ultimately, at the very least for consumer, that is how you build a phenomenal consumer product.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong when you say, oh, I'm obsessed about data.
Yeah.
It's more about the insight about the data, right? It's what you can learn about humans, about behavior. That's what you're more excited about, I would say, right?
It's the competition angle for me. I love winning. I play sports competitively. I play board games competitively. And with data, you have an answer. So I would look at the Facebook ads we were running or the influencers we were working with, and you can just see, like, of 20 influencers, one of them is running away with it. We had a girl in her first week make $50,000. And you just know that you're onto something that people are really passionate about. And then for anything that's not working, whether it's your product, whether it's your ad, the influencer you're working with, whatever, you say, great, that's not working. I'm just going to exit out and I'm going to move on. Because you can ultimately A/B test. And if you're Google, you're going to test the color of your button or how rounded the edges are. But for a startup, you don't have time for something to be 1% or 10% better.
Right.
You have to find something that people are absolutely obsessed with. They're logging in every single day. And that's a game to me. And so every day, I lead product right now. Every day I log into Meta. I see the people coming into the top of our pipeline. I log into Amplitude. I see how often people are using our platform. I log into our internal data system, our admin portal, and I log into our bank. And I see how often people are actually spending money using our card. And that's how I start the day. That's certainly a way to find bugs, but I want to know if it's going viral. I want to know if this is something that people are so passionate about.
What would you say is kind of a general rule, almost like, I don't know if there is a prerequisite for going viral, or a formula or some general, I don't know.
There definitely is.
Yeah.
The way that you go viral is for every one user that you onboard, they invite at least one other user.
Okay. Yeah.
So we call it the viral coefficient. If the viral coefficient is above 1, you have something that's going to have exponential growth. You can never maintain a viral coefficient above 1 because obviously the biggest problem that I see with companies or products that are going viral is that there's something where there's a big incentive to get on the first day, and then they're actually not retaining users. So then your viral coefficient will drop off pretty quickly. If you look at Facebook, their viral coefficient dropped off when they had more than half of the world. And that's when it just became a problem of like who has internet access.
Right.
And so I always look for the viral coefficient. I try to talk to users or interview users and say like, are you sharing this? Are you not sharing this?
Yep.
Then the question is, are they sharing it only because they make money to share it? Which for Uber and Lyft, it worked. Like that was just money. I guess you would say, I'm leaving a party, I'm taking an Uber. Someone would say, what is an Uber? But then you were like, use my code because at least they're able to track the viral coefficient. But if you find people are sharing that's not for money, maybe it's for status. Like think about Duolingo, where you're sharing and you're saying, hey, I've been taking Spanish lessons for 100 days in a row. And you want your friends to be impressed with you. I mean, that's just gold. Like that's something people are obsessed with.
Sure. And over time, it feels like the virality of things are more explosive. Is that true?
I think that's true.
Yeah.
When I think about a viral growth chart, I think of it going up and to the right, and then it flattens out, and then it goes up and to the right, and it flattens out. And so each of those, I mean, ideally, you're thinking about them in line with your fundraising goals if you are a venture-backed company. But generally, you should start with a very specific audience. And you say, I know that my platform is perfect for people who really care about the environment and have wealth of or maybe a certain education level. This is just an example. It's random. And so then you should try to get that entire audience. Because especially in an early stage company, someone wants to say, wow, this app was built for me. And then they log in, and at some point you do saturate that market. And then you say to yourself, okay, what is the next very natural group of people that would be passionate about this? Sometimes if you're building in Europe, you're saying this is one country and then the next country. In America, we're lucky that most people do speak English, so you don't have to do the localization stuff. So sometimes you're shipping a new product. Sometimes you're just expanding your marketing. But like your entire goal as a founder or a growth leader is when it starts to stagnate, figuring out how to make it go viral again.
Yeah. And the job of someone like you is to, let's say you're promoting a service or a product, is to get more people find out about the product or service faster. The better job you do, the more people will recognize it at a faster rate. Is that how it works?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, you don't want people finding out about your product before you're ready.
Okay.
And that's a big risk. And you do see this a lot with an app that will become top 10 in the App Store, and it's absolutely useless, and you can't do anything. This isn't the perfect example because this did go broader than this, but Be Real, when it went viral 2 summers ago, it was really exciting. I loved the concept. The app didn't work. To take a photo, it would take like 30 to 45 seconds. And that level of frustration for users causes massive amounts of churn. And I'm not saying that's the reason that people don't use it anymore, but it certainly didn't help. And I think you should ship products before they're perfect. I think their team did really impressive execution.
Yeah.
But I've seen that in more extreme cases where maybe you get $5, $10 for signing up, and then the platform just doesn't work. So I love product-driven growth. I think virality should be led within the product. I think there should be some reason that people want to tell their friends. Think about Venmo. When you were starting to send money to other people, then you were out to dinner with a friend and you said, hey, can I just send it to you on Venmo? And they said, what's Venmo?
Right.
I think that's genius, and it's product-driven. And if you have a product-driven organization, ideally your platform is already ready for users to get some sort of tremendous value when you're hitting that growth. A lot of venture-backed companies fake that growth from just running huge amounts of Facebook ads, where then it's a leaky bucket and people are leaving and you don't have a product-driven organization. So I think particularly as a founder, you have to have this holistic view of like, how do we do growth, but at the same time, like, is our product ready and is it delighting users?
Makes sense, yeah. Where does AI come in what you do?
Interesting question. AI, I think, is a tool. Like, everyone's talking about AI as though, like, if I put AI on my platform, suddenly you'll care.
Right.
And if someone sends me one more chatbot, I'm going to scream. I don't want to talk to chatbots. I talk to Perplexity and I talk to ChatGPT every single day. But those are tools in my toolbox that help me code. They help me think through things. They are unbelievable. And so for Future, for example, so this is the fintech that I work for, we have these missions in our platform where if you take the subway every single day in New York, we'll give you $5. Because that's awesome. Like, you're taking the subway, you're not driving. It's something really passionate. If you choose an Uber Green instead of just a normal Uber, we'll give you cash back. And so when I think about AI, I think about how do we expand the scope of our missions and use AI to determine, based on your health app data, that you actually biked or you walked to work, something we can't do with financial data. Or how do we use AI to get really, really smart about suggesting places that you could shop that are better for the environment. And to me, AI is similar to when we went to the cloud. Like, it completely revolutionized the way that we do work. It is remarkable. It's so fun to play with. But you still have to delight users. You can't just throw AI into a platform and say, great, now they will come.
Right. But in terms of like data analytics and finding patterns that you couldn't maybe access in the past, does AI help you access some of that? Or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of patterns in the past, I think machine learning was already really, really good at spotting patterns. And we have a economics team, and we also have a data science team that are very strong. I think AI is particularly interesting about running future-facing tests. And so think about, like, you're giving a computer access to your data, and if your users are okay with it, access to their data. We have a tremendous amount of financial data. And so an AI should be suggesting ways that they can go green, they can use our card more, they can be more involved in our ecosystem. And so I gave the example of, like, helping them to decide where to shop. We can also do really cool stuff with AI already, where we hook into your utility bills and we can start to give you advice about how to decrease your utility bills. And then on top of that, we'll pay you 10% for being part of our ecosystem and just for reducing your electricity and gas. And so AI is making it so much faster to build. I mean, this wasn't even like a 10x increase. This is a 100x increase, where we can find these patterns, we can test things, we can build things. And I feel really lucky that I live in a time where we have AI and it's changing our world so substantially.
For sure. Would you say then, going into the future, we have this ability to predict the future better, or the almost like this coefficient of predictability stays the same, would you say?
I think it's absolutely, we're better at predicting the future now. The problem with making predictions that have to do with humans, as someone who studied social science in college, is there's just too many variables for the human brain, and honestly AI currently, to take into effect. And so predicting science or specific aspects of science can be a lot easier. So if you start to see cancer cells in someone's body, the likelihood of them spreading is X percentage. It's a bit more of a limited scope problem. I studied poli-sci, and so when you're saying, are people going to vote for Trump or Biden this election, I don't know what news is going to come out. I don't know how Russia's going to impact the ads people are seeing. Like, there's so many externalities, but AI helps us to process these externalities faster. I've already seen AI bringing up trends in data that human researchers weren't seeing. And so I still don't think we're very good at predicting the future, but around the time we hit singularity, it'll be very interesting to see at least how much better we are at it.
Yeah. Do you think we can get to the point where AI is able to, or like AGI or super intelligence can predict most of the things?
Probably not.
Right.
I mean, it matters what you define as most of the things.
Most of the things that matter to us.
I mean, when I think about the butterfly effect and the famous movie that messed me up for years, the premise is that if a butterfly flaps their wings in Japan or whatever, it's going to affect our lives here. And when you start to get into those numbers, you're talking about trillions or whatever, Googles of numbers that I'm not sure we're anywhere close to predicting. But if you put it on a much smaller scale and you have very specific things that you want to predict. My first company, we worked heavily with data and like what makes someone buy a product. How do you increase the percentage likelihood of someone wanting your product? And so when you start to get into fewer variables but controlled situations, you can predict it a lot better. And so AI is never going to be 100% for something like that.
Right.
You just don't know if that person's having a bad day.
Right.
But I think it's really exciting. I'm an accelerationist. I think as long as we're smart and conscientious as we build out the AI, I'm hoping that it makes a better world for everyone.
Is that the main quality of accelerationist? Describe to me.
Yeah, accelerationism is that you believe that AI will improve the world.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be smart about it and paying attention to it and being worried about the times that AI gets a really bad data set, which happens frequently, and then starts saying some really horrible things. You have to be aware of that. But I do think that every time in history where there have been decelerationist, ultimately they lost. Like, I think progress happens inevitably. And like killing Galileo didn't stop the world from being round. And so I think it's better to say, great, we have progress. How do we train people to work with AI? How do we make sure that people still have these happy, healthy lives?
Yeah.
And I think it's really great if people don't need to do minimum wage jobs. Like, let's help them get more trained and be more fulfilled and be able to solve puzzles throughout the day.
Yeah.
It's what keeps me awake during the day, and
sure.
I think they deserve it too.
What would you say is then the speed at which we're navigating into the future feels to be speeding up over time, right? Do you think we'll hit a threshold where the threshold is going to be human, let's say, cognition, capability of the human cognition to now go further? The artificial intelligence, it can go much like to the infinity as fast as, but we'll hit a certain threshold after which we're like, this is the speed up we can go forward.
Interesting. Only using past data, I don't think we've ever seen that. Right. We've certainly seen times where development is faster and development is slower. I was just reading about the English language, and I was trying to figure out how far back I would be able to understand people speaking English. And it's only about 400 years, which blows my mind. So if you drop me in the 1500s, I would not be able to communicate with people. And obviously, if you drop me in the time of Beowulf, I was trying to read some of their English. It's gobbledygook to me.
Right.
And so if you think about that as a correlation to human progress, we're absolutely speeding up. And so hypothetically, in those timeframes, in 200 years, if I were to wake up 200 years from now, I wouldn't be able to speak to people. And so I think there is always room, or at least where we are right now, there's definitely room for it to continue speeding up. And yeah, my friend has a video game. He lives in Miami, which is where I live now. He has a video game called Eco. And the premise is we know that a meteor is going to hit the world, and you have to try to save the world before the meteor hits without destroying the environment and the people. And it's a super popular video game. It's an indie game. His Reddit channel is crazy. But I really love this premise of, like, how do you speed up progress without having these other externalities and paying attention to both. It's a really clever game.
And what would you say is the rush to go forward?
What do you mean?
So what's the incentive to go into the future or evolve as fast as we can?
That's an interesting question. I tend to think that progress happens in and of itself.
And at its own pace, and we have no influence on how fast it goes.
I think as a society we have very little control over it. I guess the times where progress has really stagnated in the last 100 years have been generally under communism and places where people just don't have any amount of freedom. So I certainly wouldn't want to live there. And then the question is, like, what is the value of it? It matters if you believe MLK's idea of the arc of the universe always trends towards good. And I'm sure I butchered the quote. And so if you believe progress is going to do good for people, I don't know if that's always the case. Certainly we have a lot of military progress that one could argue perhaps doesn't help all people. But progress is going to happen. And we need to figure out how to live within that world and ideally how to make it help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so AI, for example, I think it's incredible that when I'm feeling sick, I can ask AI, and unlike the health site WebMD, it doesn't always tell me I have cancer. But we can have a reasonable conversation about whether or not I should go to the doctor, just wait it out. And it feels like every 3 months that's getting better. Now I can't use ChatGPT 3.5 because it drives me nuts. I can only use 4.
Right.
And some of my friends are building up 4.5 and they say it's unbelievable. And I also wonder, and this is a little bit meta, but we have an epidemic of loneliness in this country. People who live in the suburbs or men who aren't opening up to people, etc. And like, at what point does this become human connection for people? And it's not a human, but I wonder how it can, like, if progress is going to happen anyways, how can we use it to help people who are struggling? I think loneliness is a major concern in this country.
Interesting, yeah. You think AI will be able to replace or at least temporarily replace human connection for some?
I wonder about it. I mean, there's certainly the AI chatbots that are doing better in Asia than they're doing here, where it looks like a celebrity or it looks like a woman or whatever, and people are building real relationships with them. I always thought it was crazy to have internet friends until COVID happened. And then suddenly I found that a lot of my friends really did live on the little box on my computer. And Clubhouse was very short-lived, but I made some dear friends in Clubhouse. And so it might seem crazy, but if people are able to meet others with shared values, who appreciate their company, I think the internet's a beautiful thing, that you have a world beyond the people you grew up next to. Because sometimes you don't fit in your small town.
Right.
And so if AI fills that for people, I think that's really cool.
What's the difference between a human interaction? Let's say you met a stranger and you're having a deep dive conversation on the topics that you care about, and the other side of it, a digital avatar that's a full simulated persona, completely generated by AI. It's intelligent enough for you to not be able to tell if there's no one behind it.
Sure.
What would be the difference?
My concern with AI as it is today would be that it's just telling you what you want to hear. And I do think that is the concerning part of the internet. I'm very active on Reddit. It's my favorite social channel. But there are other people who are very active on Reddit or 4chan or other places on the internet where they end up in this echo chamber where when they're sad or whatever they believe, they only hear that. And to be fair, I think in San Francisco or Boston, you can end up in a similar echo chamber. People are only telling you what you believe. But I hope there would still be that point of human interaction of realizing, or interaction, where you realize that other people have emotions and other people feel differently than you about things. Because that is at least a lot of the value of interacting with other people. It's also the value of reading books. So I think AI might be okay at that other people have these very rich internal lives like we do. And at least for your close friends, you should care about that. So I think that would be the risk. But the upside, if people can find their friends, that would be really cool.
What's your vision of the future, like a desirable future that you are excited about? Something you can relate to, okay, this is the progress that we've been having, this is the trajectory, this is probably most a likely outcome, or there's a set of outcomes and this is a more desirable one. Can you talk about the more desirable one?
Yeah. I haven't expressed this before, so it's not a entirely well thought out answer. This isn't actually AI based, but I'm extremely passionate about walkable cities, or walkable neighborhoods and living next to your friends. I think it is completely life changing to have a community around you that's not just your nuclear family. And so I'm really excited about autonomous vehicles because I think that will give us a lot more flexibility to live wherever we want to. And I'm hoping that is with friends. But if you have an AV, then even if you need to go to work you're a doctor, like let's say you do need to go to work, then you can sleep in the car on the way there, or you can work on the way there, or something like that. I hate commuting. I think it is just dead time. I don't do it. I cannot imagine myself ever taking a job where I need to do it. And so we have that. And then on the AI side, my first job, I said I was in consulting. One of the things I had to do was take call notes. So we would interview people, and I would type as fast as humanly possible. And then I would stay into the office until midnight, editing the call notes so that they were readable, and then having the summary at the top. It was a complete waste of time. AI does that so easily now.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think that's just an example of the mindless stuff that we won't need to do anymore. I mean, think about like a world before calculators, right? You were using an abacus, or you're using your fingers or whatever. So if we can get past that, but I still want humans to be solving puzzles. Like, you should still be using your brain. If I'm out with friends, I never Google something. I think you should be thinking and trying to remember things. But yeah, if we can get past just some of the mindless stuff and help people get into more things where they're either using their brain or their bodies in a way, like I think professional athletes are really cool, whatever. I think we'll end up with more art. I think in terms of Maslow's hierarchy, we could go a step above it in a way that we don't even know. So.
Does in that future, people work less or more than now?
Good question. Presumably less with what was just described. I really hate this idea of like, I think it's very sad if people go to work every single day just to get by. I think you should be passionate about what you do. Maybe not at all times, not every single day. But I think it's really sad if you're just showing up there for the paycheck. So I hope we just have more elevated jobs where you are helping people, or you're solving problems, or you're enjoying what you're doing. You're finding joy there. Yeah, I just, if you're working 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week or whatever, but you're just showing up because you have to, that's still too much of your life.
Right, for sure. And as more and more jobs are being replaced, and yes, maybe we'll have even more new jobs being created, but let's assume that we don't know that, or maybe that's not the case. What do you see what is left for humans to do?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big conversation about universal basic income. I don't know where I land on the idea of UBI. I don't fully understand the economics of it, because I feel like if we were all handed 30 grand a year, then everything would be 30 grand a year more expensive, but maybe I misunderstand. It makes me really sad, this idea of people kind of sitting around like rotting because they don't have a passion. And maybe they already are, if they're at a job that they just absolutely loathe and isn't working out their brain. But I hope we can, if we have that degree of freedom, then we can have programs to help people find whatever their passion is. Like, some of my friends make just absolutely spectacular art, and they don't sell it to anyone. But I love going to their shows if they have them. And I'm part of a running club, and I'm never going to be a professional runner, but I'm a decent runner, and I spend a lot of hours a week running, and that's never going to accomplish anything, but it makes me feel really good. And so I hope that we have more programs to help people find that joy. Maybe they get paid for it, maybe they don't, but I would love to see something where it's not. There was a Pixar movie a long time ago, maybe WALL-E, I'm not positive, where people were just living in like these sad bubbles, and they were all obese, and they just had a screen in front of them. And it was such a horrible, like, future look. Unlike Ready Player One, where they were all living in the simulation, but the simulation was kind of lit. And they were running around, and they were solving quests, and I would totally live in that simulation. So I hope it is something where people can keep doing things that bring them joy.
Yeah. How did you find your passion, or how are you finding your passion as you go forward, moving around your life? Yeah,
I think I got really lucky that I have the freedom to be choosy in what I do with my time. So in Puerto Rico, after my first company, I was unemployed for 6 months. And the first 2 weeks, I was so busy. I had a call every hour of the day. And finally, my husband said to me, he was like, you're not working. You don't need to do this. But I had just been running so fast for so long. And then I took a step back and I just tried to wake up each day and be like, what would bring me joy right now? And so I ended up, Puerto Rico is the only natural rainforest in the United States. So I ended up hiking all the time. I learned to surf. I learned to scuba dive. I taught myself how to code and took a bunch of classes online. And for each thing, I was like, does this bring me joy? And so for particularly coding, I didn't know how to code for my first company. This is just solving puzzles. It's like someone paying you to do the crossword puzzle. And so for my second company, my co-founder is still infinitely better than me at coding. He has 20 years of experience. But I was able to have these technical conversations with him. And when there was a bug or a really big feature that we were talking about, he would bring me in and we would have these amazing conversations about what the best way to build it would be. And for me, I realized, that brings me a lot of joy. And so now I lead product, but I do try to get into the code at least once a week so that I can help with the engineers, like help plan work in a way that is relevant to what they're building. And so I got lucky, and I know that's what makes me want to get up in the morning versus sales does not make me want to get up in the morning.
Sure, yeah. And do you think, so they say, coding is something that's going away, that kids probably won't need to code ever again in the future.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Like, would we still need skills of that kind, maybe a little bit more abstract in terms of not down to the actual logic of the code, but more about the functionality and things like that? Or will it all be just completely taken care of by AI and humans will just do human things? I don't know, human connection and other things.
I think if we ever have a world where logic is not relevant to the human experience, then we've lost. Like, that's a singularity. Then the machines have logic and we honestly are dead, because I don't know why they would keep us around. Like, even my dog is logical, right? Like, she knows if she's obsessed with going in the pool, but she wants us in the pool with her. So she knows if she goes and takes down a towel and comes to us, there's probably a 50% chance that we're getting in the pool with her. That's logic. Like, if that never worked, she wouldn't do it. And so will kids still need to code? I mean, in the same way that, like, we're not coding in zeros and ones.
Right.
We have this elevated form of coding. I still think there's going to be a world where you need good prompts. You need to think through big problems. Right. And it's not just coding that takes logic. Growth takes a lot of logic. How do you get huge groups of people to care about anything? Yeah. Sales takes a huge amount of logic. Yeah. That's not my passion, but it is some people's passion. Yeah. So, like, if I were to ever have kids, I would have them doing logic games all the time. Yeah. Logic will still be critical, and it will be the most logical people, or the people able to solve logic puzzles will be the people most successful.
It feels like you live in a world of logic. Would you say, like, the entire experience, for at least for you, is all based on some logical configuration in some place? Is that true?
And people say, like, a lot of people talk about logic versus emotions. Yes. But you can have logic about people's emotions, right? Like, yes. I don't think they're exactly the opposite. If you think about doing sales, you're using logic to try to read someone's body language or what they're saying or what their timeline is. And you do need a higher EQ to do sales than to code. But if you're smart about the logic of setting up a program and a process, it works out better. Yeah. So sometimes I can definitely be emotional. I care a lot. You can't always be, like, arm's length about the things you care about. But I like to think that if I think something's true and someone shows me data saying that it's not true, I will change my mind and be pretty open to learning.
What do you think of intuition? Where does that come from?
It's a good question. I do wonder if intuition is learned logic, and something that happens in a subconscious way that you, like, this, that is statistically correct. It makes me nervous, but I do think people should trust their intuition generally. I don't think that I've met, if I have a very strong reaction to someone, we had a lawyer who came to our office years ago to try to sell us on working with him. And he sat down and he opened his legs as like wide as the table, leaned back, and it was kind of like a sell me thing. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm the CEO of this company. I don't care who our lawyer is. I just had this really bad impression of him, so I didn't end up working with him. And more recently, he's done something that I really don't like, and this is 6 years later. And I was like, yeah, like I guess my intuition there was correct. But I don't think that was random. I don't think it was because of what he looked like. I think it was the way that he carried himself and the way that he spoke down to me. And so I do think that's from learning. And your intuition is not going to always be perfect because you haven't been in every situation. Yeah.
Do you have moments where you're receiving new insights from within? They're not, maybe you are processing some information that you have received and now the insight came when the dots connected. Is it all about just processing information to receive the insight, or do you have, because I have my belief is that sometimes insight come not from your mind, they come through you. You're able to just pick them up, like tune into a certain knowledge that's you're able to wrap language and understanding around it and then be able to communicate it.
Yeah. Sometimes when I feel too emotional about something, I sleep on it before doing anything. And I think while I sleep, my brain is still processing. And then either I have a sense of where to go or I can put words to what the feeling was. I think that helps a lot. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts or experience with kind of like a metaphysical existence that's not quantifiable maybe, but so many people talk about spirituality and other things. Yeah.
I am deeply not superstitious. I used to be, and I think this was maybe high school, college. This was a feeling where I had a lack of control. And so because I didn't feel that I could change the world around me, I would say, oh, well, I don't think it was this obvious, but I'd be like, oh, well, a black cat crossed my path. Like, that's why I didn't do well in a test. Or I walked under a ladder, and that's why things aren't going well. And I was too focused on that, and I can't, even if it's true, I can't solve those things, right? Like, whether or not it's real, it's outside of my control, and so I should not have anxiety about it. So I became deeply unsuperstitious. Like, if you want me to break a mirror, I'm happy to. And I'm only going to stress out the things that I can control. So ideally only the future. And even future casting, I think, is not super helpful. So every day I have a to-do list, and sometimes it's questions I want to answer about my own life or my company's. Sometimes it's literal tasks. But I try to be as rational as possible about those things. And I am a religious person, but for me, religion is a gratefulness practice. Like, I'm so blessed to live in this time, in this world. I think most of us, not all of us, but I think most of us are extremely blessed.
Yeah.
And your entire life will be better if you spend some time every single day thinking about 5 good things that happened to you that day, and maybe what you're going to do to have more good things happen to you.
And apart from your physical body, do you think your essence ends with the physical body? Let's say when you die, you're done basically, and then a new life emerges somewhere else, and there's no continuation to your consciousness or to your whatever else is left outside. That's not, if it's not just the body.
I think this Dumbledore quote has always really resonated, that death is but the next great adventure. I think we have no way right now of having any idea what happens. I don't particularly believe in resurrection because that seems kind of depressing, just to come back and do it again. Maybe that's true. Maybe there's something after this that is so different our human brains couldn't even conceptualize it. But I hope when that time comes that I'm excited about it, because none of us know.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are just essentially asleep, I really like sleeping. So hopefully it's something really cool. But I don't think we should be good in an effort to go to heaven or hell. I think we should be as good as we can be because we really impact the people around us. And like, we've all had someone do something to us that makes us sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't want to go to sleep having caused that for someone else.
Yeah.
So.
Have you ever had lucid dream before?
I was kind of into lucid dreaming in college.
Yeah.
I can definitely be aware that I am dreaming. And sometimes I actually wonder if I live an entirely different life at night. I can do some pretty cool stuff in my dreams.
Like what?
Sometimes I can do magic. I've flown a little bit. But every single dream I have is like a scavenger hunt of some kind.
Yeah.
So I must be like searching or yearning.
Yeah.
But I'm always so thrilled to be doing it. And often there's like friends with me and we're trying to solve something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very energizing.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like in life, in your waking life, you also on the search. It sounds like you're searching for stuff.
Probably.
What are you searching for?
I don't know. It's a great question. I do wonder sometimes, like, what is going to be the story of my life? Like, at the end, if I had an obituary, what would it say? But then I'm like, I don't think you should just focus on that if it's going to make your day-to-day worse. Like, there are people that's all they've done. Like, you know, they were like, I'm gonna run for Senate at some point, and that's gonna be my legacy.
Right.
And I think we're in a world now where, like, there's more grace for people who just do cool stuff when given the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm trying not to structure my life as much like that.
Mm-hmm. What's your relationship with anxiety?
Oh, I definitely have it.
Yeah.
I think every founder has anxiety or at the very least mental health problems.
Sure.
The other thing I've noticed is there's so many founders that are only children. And I wonder if that's from being told that we were grown up when we were young or something about proving our space in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely have anxiety. When I have my own companies, my happiness level is directly correlated with how much money's in the bank. Because the idea that I wouldn't be able to pay people or something like that, I've never missed payroll, but God forbid I did. It just sounds awful.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think it makes me great, and other times I think, like, there's aspects where it really doesn't. Like, if you're negotiating with someone, you don't want to be really stressed about it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be like, yeah, whatever, like, call me when you know.
Yeah.
And then they want you. So,
Right.
yeah.
I noticed that the level of anxiety is often proportional to how fast you want to navigate your life. Like, the faster you want to go, the more friction you're gonna, encounter with reality. And you get to decide most often what speed you're going with. Like, what's the acceptable speed at which you want to navigate. And I think that framework just helps me to lower the stress and anxiety by just lowering the speed. Like, instead of, yes, we have desires to achieve something or to have something possess, lowering the expectations or lowering those desires in the time frame, like you're basically stretching the timeline, usually affects the level of anxiety. Like, you become less anxious.
Yeah, maybe. I just read Winston Churchill's biography, or one of his biographies, and he was positive that he was going to die young because his dad died young.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, I have to get into Parliament. I have to ideally become MP, like, before I'm 40 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't. He actually had about 10 years of his young life. He was an MP, but he was, like, uniformly despised across all the MPs. He was calling out the Nazis in the 30s, like, wasn't popular.
Mm-hmm.
And he ultimately became, obviously, or maybe not obviously, I think the most successful war leader of the last few hundred years. At an age where, like, he thought he was going to be dead or over with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really inspiring. I think he was really true to himself. And I like doing a lot of things. I'm always busy. I'm always doing things. I love building, and that makes me really happy just to see how my creations impact people and what they say about it. But I also don't think we can totally predict the future. And so it's like surfing, like to whatever extent you can swim as hard as you can, but then like you got to ride the wave.
Right.
And if the wave's not coming at that point, then like swim out again and ride the wave again.
Is there something that you haven't achieved that you have a clear vision of, like, this is what I, at some point in my life, I would want to have? What would that be?
I don't have anything that like stands out to me. I like the idea of trying a bootstrapped company because I've never done that. I think that'd be really interesting, just to work with like the money you have on hand and build that up and see what happens. There's a bunch of entrepreneurs I look up to who have done that. But I'm also really enjoying where I'm at right now. And I just kind of I think of my life in 10-week increments. So I spend 10 weeks at a time, like building something or trying to learn about something. And I found that really satisfying.
Why 10 weeks?
I don't know. It feels like a reasonable amount of time before I get bored of something.
Yeah.
And it's enough time. You have enough time to learn something really well and then execute on it. And then decide, like, is this a great idea? Is this boring? Did this not work? And I think I chose it somewhat randomly. I think I said 2 months when I was working with this company, and they said, can you do 10 weeks? And I said, sure, whatever. And now I think 10 weeks is like a really nice period of time. And then I learn it and I decide if that's something I'm passionate about or not.
What would you say, what was the last really insightful, inspiring conversation that you've had, and what was it about?
What an interesting question. Okay. I went to Austria last week. I was skiing. I've never skied before. And I got there a day after people. So I got there in the afternoon and a bunch of people had skied in the morning. My best friend on the trip, there's 12 people. My best friend on the trip walked into the house and I immediately knew something was wrong. And I was like, what's up? And she had torn her ACL on the first day of our ski trip. And I think she is such a badass. She was just, I mean, obviously super disappointed. Like, what a horrible thing to happen. She's going to be in this leg brace for 3 months. She couldn't do anything. If it was me, I think I would have gone home. I think I would have just been kind of embarrassed. She was also new to skiing. I think I would have been like, well, this was a complete waste of time and money. Yeah. She stayed the entire week. She was the most fun person in our group of friends. And when I talked to her about it, I said, hey, like, I'm really impressed by you. Like, I want to live my life like you're living it right now. She was like, well, like, things happen. Obviously, I'm disappointed, but, like, I can either go home and be like, that was horrible, or I can stay here. I can read amazing books. I can go to lunch on the top of a mountain, which is beautiful. And she was planning opera for us. So we were partying, and she was planning it and meeting people. And people, like, heard about her all across the ski resort. And it's just, like, you don't know what's going to happen in your life. But if you can have the best attitude about it, like, try to see the silver lining. You can't always. But if you can figure that out, you are going to have a better life than everyone else, regardless of, like, what you accomplish, what you do. I thought it was so beautiful. We had the best trip. Nice. And I think she's really inspirational.
Amazing, yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, we can't really control what happens to us. Yes, we have some involvement in that process, but we don't have full control. Like, anything unpredictable can happen. But what we are in control of how we respond to it. Totally. And it sounds like she responds to uncertainties or undesirable events like that in a really productive, constructive way.
Yeah, and, like, when you were asking, like, kind of what the plan is, I think you should work towards goals. I think the journey towards a goal is so fun. Like, you don't even have to hit the goal. I think the journey is amazing. But I think you also have to live in a way that you're like, if I get hit by a car tomorrow, will I be happy with where I am right now? And if the answer is no, because I was trying to make partner and I was ruining my life and whatever, like, that's so sad. We might only live one life. And so it's not that every day needs to be fun, but I think you should be able to look back and say, I felt happy. I've made people around me feel happy, and I found a few people that I really love.
Mm-hmm. What are some ideas that you've been lately super passionate and excited about?
In the tech space, I'm really interested right now in unsexy businesses. So one of my buddies is buying up dentist shops all over the place, and he's trying to bring them online and have a way where if you like move towns, you can still go to the same dentist brand that you believe in. There's obviously a bunch of people on Twitter who are talking about storage units, parking garages, like physical products that have a value. I think that's so exciting. And I definitely bought in really hardcore to the VC marketing model from a young age, which was like, oh, it's so impressive when you raise X amount of money. And I think you should raise venture if it's right for your company. Like if you need to grow extremely fast, you're willing to sell a huge amount of your business. One of my buddies was not able to raise money in 2016 is around when we both started our companies. He wasn't able to raise. So he raised almost nothing. He sold his company 2 years ago for $50 million. That has made him more money than someone who raises a bunch of money and sells for $1 billion. And it's not all about money. Like he also enjoyed the journey, but he wasn't reporting to a board. He wasn't sending out investor updates. And I just I want to learn more about that. I don't know that much about it. Like, how do you start? Where do you get the capital? Like, how do you know if it's working? So I've been doing these little tests online to try out these little e-com ideas. I haven't put my full heart and soul behind it yet, but I'm really good at growth marketing. And so I think I'm interested in finding like one or two products and kind of just like seeing what the world looks like from there.
Personal brand is super important in that process when you're bootstrapping something, because you can just, no matter what you start, if you have an audience, those are your first customers who will, root for you and like support you in whatever you're doing. The first true 1,000 fans by famous Kevin Kelly. You can really have a living with just a handful of people.
You definitely can.
Right.
I think you can. I think you don't have to. Like there's so many people right now, especially people who are purportedly very wealthy, who are trying to make these personal brands. And I think if it makes you happy and getting on Twitter every day and getting in fights is like your jam, fantastic. I think there's so many people who are actually very quiet who have tremendously successful brands. One of my buddies has a company, I'm obsessed with it, that is reforming the cremation industry. So like when your loved one dies, suddenly you have to like deal with funeral homes and it's so overwhelming. You have no idea what to do. Right. It's incredibly expensive. Like, why isn't that an easy process? Like, what a horrible time in your life. Right. And so he has bought a few cremation facilities. He's also like made this marketplace. You can go online and like find it really easily, know the price up front. He's pretty quiet on social media. Like, I don't think you would find him. But he knows what he's doing and he's building, and that's what makes him happy. Yeah. I think if I get back on social media, I might do it anonymously. I haven't been as active. I was really active on Twitter a few years ago, and I had a TikTok following that was quite large. I don't know. I think anonymity is kind of a cool thing. That's why I really like Reddit. I think you should have these real conversations. You're not going to get canceled. And I'm not an asshole on the internet at all. I think I'm quite nice. But I don't want everything I say to be looped back to me. And I like the genuine aspect of being anonymous.
Yeah, I definitely think, you could be successful in anything that you do without exposing your persona at all. But it does seem to help a lot of people to have positive, strong personal brand.
It definitely helps. It makes it a bit easier. But when I say easier, it is so much work to get the personal brand. So I really do think you have to love it. Like, I know a girl who outsourced her whole brand. I adore her. She's so smart. She's so wonderful. But she outsourced it, and I'm like reading her content being like, this isn't you. You're so much cleverer than this. And I think you can outsource someone to give you ideas. I've seen that a lot amongst like VCs and busy people. Yeah. But I think you have to really enjoy making content to do it day in, day out.
Yeah. The topic of privacy and transparency online, what do you think is if you had to change the current way of us living in this digital age, what would you do? Like, what's you think is not working? What would be better?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think if you want to have your name out there and that's beneficial to you and you love it, then like go for it. I think it's hard when people get canceled from stuff they posted when they were in their teenage years and now they're 30. Right. I actually really like that people have grown, and I mean, at the very least, if it comes up, I think they should be able to be like, yes, like I was a shitty teenager and now I'm better. And everyone should be like, wow, like congrats for getting better. But I also think there's a lot of room for privacy. Like Facebook didn't allow it early on. Twitter has, but now is kind of weird about it. Reddit always has. And I think we can have these communities with moderation. So I'm a Reddit mod of a very big subreddit, where you can still have like respectful, nice conversations, but it doesn't have to be something all your colleagues are reading, for example. Like, I love reality TV. I think it is it's human condition. You learn so much watching it. I love it. I don't need my colleagues knowing like my views on The Bachelor. They can if they want. Right. I'm happy to tell them. But you know, like when you post on Twitter, everyone sees it. It's very public.
Well, it sounds like it would be beneficial to just have, and we already have versions of that, where certain platforms are for certain purposes. Some of them are public, you're just exposing all of it, and then others are not, and so you get to decide what you say where, maybe. I like this idea of, let's say, you owning your data, and through some kind of smart contract, you allow whatever platform to expose some data about you, and then at any given moment you just say, oh, no, I don't want to share this part anymore. Yeah, for sure. Because I feel like now it's super hard to, if there's stuff about you out there, especially on like public sites, that you didn't necessarily put that information out there, it's hard to clean it up. Like, you have to hire like a PR firm or something.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason that certain platforms really resonate with people. Snapchat, Instagram stories, they go away. Be Real, we talked about. That's really resonating with people. And like, why isn't there an option on Twitter where you say after a year, like, I want every one of my tweets deleted? Because that is a microcosm of who I am today, not who I was. And it's a ton of work to clean it up. So I think that's a nice idea. And then I think celebrating anonymity, and the more that we can like create content without your face being shown, it just gives people like a little bit more artistic freedom to like say the things that they actually think, or just make a silly video that you like don't want to be embarrassed about. It's nice. When I went viral on TikTok a few times, and it's so delightful and so kind when people reach out and they're like, I saw it, I loved it. But there is this thing where you're like, I went to middle school with you. Like, how weird is that? And I'm
so
lucky.
You've had messages like that?
Oh, yeah. 100%. A bunch.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. Nothing I put out there do I actually think is bad. So for the Reddit IPO, they reached out. They said, you're a mod of a major subreddit and a really active Reddit user. Like, we'll get you into the IPO. They said, but you have to break anonymity. We're not going to post it on our site or anything, but you have to break anonymity, obviously, to get into the IPO. That's how IPOs work. And it was a no-brainer to me. Like, I wanted to own Reddit. And I was like, yeah, here's all my information. Because nothing's embarrassing. I just want a little bit of a wall between someone Googling my name and immediately finding me on Reddit.
For sure. What was that subreddit, or is that subreddit? I
don't share the subreddit.
What do you think of avatars, people using more and more like an image of yourself? I mean, it's not really you, just a representation of you.
I think it's sick. Like, think about Ready Player One, like the end of the book. It's a spoiler for anyone who hasn't read the book that's very old. Yeah. At the end of the book, he realizes his best friend, who's this kind of, I anticipated to be like this bulky white dude, is a black woman who might be a lesbian. I don't remember. And they were best friends because they cared about the same things. And I think it's great. Like, I think if you look a certain way or whatever, like, it should be within your purview to be judged the way you want to be judged. And if you want people to see you, then that's great. And if you don't, like, I think it's really cool that you can live your best life.
Mm-hmm. Some people have this skin, what is it called? Skin bag bias of body and your physical essence or physical version of you is important, and representing yourself with the physical, like showing your face, is the true you, and then the other versions of you are just you hiding, or it's, I don't know, it's like a distorted version of you or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's their prerogative, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's surprising because I actually think in many religions, at least Western religions, the idea is that the soul is who you really are and your body is like more or less irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
We live in Miami where a lot of people do plastic surgery. I think within reason, like, that's awesome. Like, be whoever you want to be. I hope it makes you really happy. Yeah, I don't think my physical body is the penultimate of who I am or the ultimate of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly factors into the way people treat you, your confidence levels, whatever. But no.
Do you think we'll ever get to the point where we'll be able to live outside our physical body, like uploading yourself somewhere?
Like after you die, or just like going into a metaverse?
Uploading your consciousness, I guess. That's kind of like a common theme, of futuristic movies and stuff, where you can upload yourself, and then now you don't need to be here in the physical body anymore. You can just float in a frictionless digital environment.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you buy that? Like, how do you see there's maybe maybe there's something about us being in the physical body that's there's no way for us to just if you upload yourself, it's just a replica. It's not really, it's like like money money is not a real, it's just a piece of paper that represents something.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
I think if it was your entire consciousness, it's 100% you. Like, I think your consciousness, your soul, your brain, whatever, is more you than your body. Because our bodies age, right? Like, you get old, and my body's changed a lot since I've been alive. Do I think it's going to happen? I think it definitely could. I actually think one of the areas of science that's least researched, or at least the least understood, is the brain.
It's the brain, yeah.
And so I'm not sure how close we are at this second. But I think it's a cool idea. I read a lot of books about the metaverse. I think I know that's not exactly what you said.
No,
the metaverse,
right.
You're like hooking
that's also a topic that I would love to.
Fun. Yeah.
So tell me some of the ideas that you've been like wrapping your mind around, excited about metaverse. What's cool about it?
So when I was little, I used to watch or consume a lot of content about like witches and magic. And when people said, of all the superpowers, like if you could have one, which one would you have? Yeah. And I really loved, there was a superpower in the show Charmed, where she could, I don't know if she like snapped her fingers or something and just disappear from one place, show up somewhere else, all over the world. Right. And I was like, that would be lit. I don't want to read people's minds because I think people actually should have privacy. I think that'd be very upsetting. But I was like, if I could show up anywhere and I could do lunch with you, dinner with my friend in Switzerland, breakfast with my friend in Seoul, like what a life that would be. And they never even got into like outer space, but I'd love to go to outer space. And the metaverse gives us, I mean, in a hypothetical world, we don't have it yet. No. But the metaverse gives us this potentially human connection to anyone in the world. This ability to have like games and sports that are like so much more interesting. And I just really like reading the books because they're wild. And I think that's something that could happen in our lifetime. 100%. I didn't start playing video games until I was an adult. I wasn't allowed to as a kid. But I play video games, no shooters. I don't really like shooters, but I play like any sort of RPG, and they make me really happy. And how fun would it be if you were actually in there and running around and meeting people and doing cool stuff? Sounds awesome.
The definition of what does it mean to be a true human, like a human? In the past, it would probably mean something that's deeply integrated in nature and community and other humans, do you see us redefining the term, what it means to be human? Maybe it's this entity that's floating in the metaverse space, and that's the modern human.
Maybe. Not today, but it certainly could be. Yeah, I don't know how to define a human. Because these all get quite complicated, right? Because if you say it's like a certain IQ level, you have a real problem, right? Like, 'cause then babies aren't human or people with disabilities aren't human. So I'm actually not quite sure where that line is. But maybe it is the connections that we build with each other, our way of thinking. And maybe it does get decoupled from the way that we move. And yeah, I mean, there's other species. This is getting a little ridiculous, but I just read, what was the book called? It's a book. The guy's such a good writer. He wrote Red Shirts, and more recently he wrote, it was like Supervillain or something. But they figured out how to communicate with dolphins because dolphins are so intelligent, and cats, but the dolphins are more interesting. And so if we're talking about this metaverse, and then we start to think about the really intelligent animals that we have, that we just don't have shared language with, which also gets into aliens, and if we do end up being multiplanetary, and like, who are we going to run into? How do we live in a world where it might even be like post-language? I think is really cool.
What does that look like, you think? Is it telepathy type communication?
I mean, in the metaverse, it certainly could be. If it was something that you could plug into, if we figure out a way to read minds. But then telepathy, only 50% of people have an internal monologue. I don't have an internal monologue. So I'm speaking to you out loud because I know that that is how I communicate with other people. But if you were to see in my brain, it's not words. It's, I don't know how to describe it, but it's pictures or feelings or what have you. And so I think it's so far beyond our ability to think about. But I do find that communicating is really slow. Talking is faster than typing. We type all the time.
Right. And
we're definitely not sharing our thoughts at the pace that we're having them.
Yeah, I think about that also a lot. Like I'm sure you've heard of theories that, like a natural telepathy without using technology, humans, at least based on those stories, I don't know if there's like a hard scientific facts that telepathy is a thing, and that we have this ability to connect to other minds over large distances. What do you make of that? Like, how does that work?
People are saying we currently have telepathy?
Some humans, maybe in the past, maybe in the present, were able or are able to telepathically receive information.
Interesting. When some of my girlfriends are really into astrology, going to psychics, and I always tell them, it's not that I don't believe that there are psychics. Like, there definitely could be. I have no idea. There's too many unknowns in this universe to say for sure about anything. That being said, it is certainly a realm that is ripe for scammers. And I try to not spend time with scammers. And so I think there absolutely could be people who can do remarkable things, like well beyond the explanation of science. I would love to be a part of it. I'd love to learn more. But it makes me nervous. And I try really hard as a human not to be skeptical about almost anything. It's so easy to be skeptical about everything because you're right and you didn't have any money on the line, and it's just kind of like a lame take. But this is one where I don't know. I think there are also ancient cultures that just understood things in a different way than we do, and to an extent could feel like magic to us.
Maybe a few more questions about the metaverse. Is that something you foresee yourself building something for that? Like, are you more, you look at it more as a someone as a consumer, as someone who would enjoy experiencing it, or do you see yourself as a builder of some kind of experience?
I would be so lucky to build for the metaverse. I was playing with an Apple Vision Pro. It's obviously super nascent. There isn't a lot of use cases today, but I do think they built it so that people would build use cases. So I was talking to a friend about building for and what we would build and what we're excited about. We don't have anything specific yet, but I think I'd be really lucky to be part of it and think more about it.
Any closing thoughts or ideas that you would like to share with the audience, or even the ways people can find you, or any projects you're currently working on that you want people to check out, things like that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
This is so fun.
Yeah.
You can find me on, I believe, any platform under Kendall H as in Hope Tucker, Kendall H Tucker. And yeah, feel free to shoot me a message. I really like talking to early stage builders. I'm working at Future. It's future.green. And they're building really remarkable stuff and innovations in the fintech and environmental space.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is great.